And we're live, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, my whiskey brothers and sisters, and welcome to the seventh episode of the Alberta Scotch Society and Friends Whisky Book Club. As always, we're honored to have you, the viewer, the panel, Davin de Kergommeaux, the author of Canadian Whisky, the new portable expert. We've all got that. Good stuff. He's with us tonight, and he's anxious to get going. This is, however, a very sad week for us, as we must say goodbye to Davin for a little while. Again, on the bright side, I get to spend another Saturday night with you most excellent people on the panel, Davin, and out there in the audience. So tonight we're dealing with the second part of Section 5, which is entitled The 8 Distillers of Canadian Whisky. And this is chapters 22 to 25 and the epilogue, to be precise. So without further ado, let's do our roundtable introduction with your name, your other platform handles, and tell us a little bit about what's in your glass, please. And as always, we're starting with Davin.
I'm drinking single malt whiskey from Maison Civaux in Quebec, and I'm Davin de Kergommeaux.
Excellent. And Nick, you're up.
I'm Nick. I go by Black Cat Whiskey on Instagram, and I'm drinking Shelter Point. I have two tonight. I have the Artisan as well as the Double Barrel.
Beautiful. And we're going to go to Yukon Dave.
Well, he's already told you it's Yukon Dave, and I'm doing some Gibson's 12. I bought it a couple episodes ago, and I didn't really care for it, so I didn't bring it on, but started drinking it earlier today, and yeah, I think it's time to talk about it.
All right, good. And over to Kent.
Hi, I'm Kent. I'm also going by Whiskey Ass. Tonight, I'm actually going to a bourbon sling, but I'm doing it with the copper pot out of JP Weiser's.
Excellent.
Oh, nice.
And
wow, curveball.
And then Don. Oh, you got his face though. There we go.
I'm Don. You can find me at the Whiskey Dive on all social media. And I am drinking Crown XO. The light in the background's not doing it much justice, but yeah, there you go. Crown XO.
Oh, do you have that bag that goes with it? The silver bag?
Absolutely.
Silver bag, that's a nice one.
There you go.
XO. And I, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Dolph Shaw. I'm the president of the Alberta Scotch Society, and no one else did this tonight, we have no repeats tonight. That doesn't usually happen. Stock and Barrel Rye. So we're there. And later on to Dark Horse, because we talked about that a little bit. And I'm glad that we're all doing something different. Is this the first time, guys? Can we say that? The very first time we're all doing it? Something different?
I think so, yeah.
All right. Good for us. All right. So we've been discussing this book, Canadian Whisky, the new portable expert, for 7 weeks now. We've talked about such things as tasting notes, art, posters, pro-Canadian outlook, science, and history. But there's something new from this section, which I found really, really interesting. It was the tasting notes from the heads and tails of the whiskey. Now, Davin says it is instructive to smell and taste them, as the ideal center cut will include well-balanced elements of both. So I think this is a real cool way of looking at the final product, and it's something I've never done. So this part of the chapter brought me to that, and that's what stood out for me. Davin, have you been doing this specifically with the heads and tails for a long time, or just this one time?
Well, no, not just that one time. You know, whenever I get a chance to do it, and you have to kind of be at the distillery to do it. What really drew it to my attention was at the Valleyfield Distillery in Montreal, where I nosed the heads and I nosed the tails, and I mean they're really quite different. And taste bubble gum, marshmallows, and things like that. But then I went back and nosed the heads, and my goodness, they just exploded with chocolate. And the distiller there really kind of smiled and laughed and said, "Yeah, it's not the same when you one and the other, or smell one then the other than the other." So yeah, I've been doing that, well, as long as I've been around distilleries. Yeah.
Well, one of the advantages of being you, I guess, going to every distillery and they let you have any taste. Has anyone else on the panel been to a distillery where they talked about that, or anywhere, or read it online? Because, like I said, this was my first time seeing it.
Yeah, I got a chance to see our still in action, and how sulfury the new make was, and then what came out of that in a few minutes was so different. It was really interesting. The first piece that came off was thrown down the drain, and I didn't get to smell that or taste that. But now, because of this book and what we've been doing, I'd like to go back and try it again.
Excellent, and I think you should. And I any chance I have now to actually taste either one, I'll be right there in it, and really happy to do it. Highwoods, let's go Highwoods. Let's start with the first distillery. Quite different from the other distilleries that we've read about. What did we notice that was different? Something really interesting about Highwoods. Anyone?
We use wheat. That was so different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think it's because of where we are. Wheat's a little easier access for the volume they're doing. Davin,
it's a lot easier to access than corn. That's for sure.
Corn for the Eastern, because I could see in your book, you could sure see the history of it, where they all started doing corn because they had easy access to it.
Easy access, yeah, but wheat is much easier to get out there. I mean, remember, a lot of the cost of grain is the shipping, so they don't have to ship it so far. It grows right there in the prairies. So
and we have a different amount of wheat here in Alberta and Saskatchewan, of course, but we also have a fairly good amount of corn. So they would be right in the wheat belt, but they're also right in the corn belt. It kind of surprised me that they were straight up wheat.
But yeah, I wasn't aware of that kind of corn being grown in there. I know there's corn. I mean, quite famous corn for humans to eat, but sweet corn does not make good whiskey, though.
Oh,
that was my question: is the corn, because they had a specific name for the corn in Ontario.
Mm-hmm.
That's got to be different than what we're getting out here from Southern Alberta.
Is that more of a feed corn that they're using then?
Yeah, it's for feed or for flour, things like that. Yeah, it's dent. It's dent corn. It's
dent. That's the word. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
all right.
So
One of the other ones I had was how the grain, they put whole wheat grain in there, and then with the steam and with it hitting the bell. So maybe Davin, you can talk about this bell for a second. It hits the bell, it explodes, and Davin was saying that at the end you can tell that most of the grain has been exposed and ready to be made into alcohol. So what's a bell, Davin?
Well, I mean, that's what they call it. It's not really a bell. They heat the grain with steam, and it's like popcorn. It's all exploding, but some of it doesn't explode. So they blast it out of the cooker, and it hits just a metal, like some kind of a metal backstop that shakes something like a bell. And when it hits that, there's the pressure and the heat. There's so much steam inside each kernel that whatever haven't exploded already will just burst there and expose all the starch. So it's a very different process.
It's a neat visual, thinking everything hitting it and turning into popcorn and getting all mushed together in there.
I know, but nothing better than wet popcorn.
And anyone else get the part that they bought the Potter's Distillery in Kelowna? I thought that was kind of cool too.
Yeah.
And when I'm reading about these guys, it feels like I'm rooting for the little guy. But are they the little guy? So, Davin, they're part of your big eight, but are they the smallest? Or the other question would be, is why are they part of your big eight? Is it because they do a Canadian blend? Or are they just bigger than most of the new distilleries coming out now?
Well, it's a combination. It is one of the legacy distilleries.
Okay.
When there were only 8 distilleries, that was one of them. It is larger. Yeah, it's larger than I think any of the startups that we have right now, and they do produce traditional Canadian style whiskey there. So yeah, it's one of the big commercial distilleries. It's the only one left that's still privately owned, though. And as far as buying potters, most people are under the impression that Potter's distillery in Kelowna was actually distilled, and they did not. They had a bottling line, but they never had a still installed in Kelowna ever.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Now Potter's, when it was in Vancouver, they did distill out there. They did have a still out there, but when they moved to Kelowna, they didn't bring the still with them. They were just a broker, you know. It was owned by McGuinness, and they just purchased whiskey a lot, and they recycled a lot of, they bottled a lot of McGuinness whiskey. A lot of it coming out of Weyburn, Saskatchewan, actually.
Ever cool.
Yeah.
And let's go to different distillery. Now, we read a lot about Huron Walker already, but did we learn anything new about Huron Walker?
I geeked out here a bit because they talked about and the specific variation of spring rye. Rye is a hard crop, and the spring rye that refer to here being a hybrid, I actually I'm like, okay, let's go read up on this in the ag books right now. It's difficult, finicky, so it's interesting that they chose such a product that's going to take a lot of effort by the farmers to actually grow it. Got a lot of nitrogen needs, so you're putting on a lot to try and grow and yield.
Okay. Did I say they're using spring rye? Because if so, you have found an error in my book.
Go, Nicole.
And the prize is a signed book.
Walker has identified a specific spring variety that's for maintaining the flavor profile.
Okay.
Page 240.
Page 240.
Last sentence.
So where do we get our refund?
No refunds.
Because I'm like, oh, this is cool. Because rye's a hard product to grow, and doing a spring rye, because you have to make sure it's got enough ground cover during the winter, that it has enough moisture, that the ground is in good condition when you put it on. There's just so many varieties to it. And he says I completely geeked out, and that's a bit of my farm background. So I had fun with that.
Nick, did you say it was the last sentence on page 240?
Yeah.
So last sentence on page 240 of mine is after fermentation using commercial yeast and a proprietary yeast strain that Huron Walker is self-isolated.
Go up to the top just before Huron Walker's specifics. It's Walker's has identified a specific spring variety for maintaining the flavor profile of one of its flavoring whiskeys.
I see it right here.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to check that out, because I remember when they told me that, but that seems unlikely to me, because rye, the best rye is winter rye. You sow it in the fall, and it has to vernalize over the winter, so it has to get cold. And the first year, it's used just, they graze cattle on it, and then the second year when it comes up, that's when they harvest the seeds. And it's not particularly difficult to grow. It has very low requirements for fertilizer or for nitrogen, and it doesn't need water. It doesn't care if it gets drought. It's a crop that'll grow where nothing else will grow. The new varieties of rye, the new hybrid ryes, are incredibly expensive to grow and difficult to grow. They need massive amounts of nitrogen, and they were not developed as whiskey grains. They're developed to make bread, And the things they look for in rye are things that it will all kind of ferment together, so that when the bread is rising, you don't get big bubbles and things like that. So I know that Huron Walker has switched to using a hybrid rye. They're quite happy with it. When I was in grad school, grain was my specialty, and I remain unconvinced, because the hybrid ryes have far and away too much starch in them. They certainly produce a lot more alcohol, but my expectation would be that they would produce a lot less flavor. This is why Crown Royal has not gone to hybrid rye. I mean, they sell 40% of all the Canadian whiskey sold is Crown Royal, and Alberta Distillers has not gone to hybrid rye. Both of those brands use winter rye. So, but I do know that they were talking about changeover when I was talking about that. And it wasn't Don who I interviewed on that, and it wasn't David Doyle who was the blender until Don took over. It was Ian. Sorry, I forgot the guy's name. But in any case, I know they were experimenting with it at the time that I was writing that chapter. So if they're using spring rye, well, it wouldn't surprise me. Wouldn't surprise me if they're using a hybrid rye if they've got a spring rye. But the American distillers are all using a winter rye as well. It's just, I mean, they use it for flavor. They don't use it for alcohol. So they want to. So Nick, that's a really, really good catch, and I'm going to investigate that because spring
you know what? We learned something else new tonight, which is good. Every night we learn something, so we can click in onto this. So we learned that Davin can be wrong or not. His book. I don't know. One of the two.
I was wrong once, Dolph. I thought I made a mistake.
Once.
Anyone else? It was really
something new about Hiram Walker.
Pardon me? Oh.
Anyone else have something new that they learned about Hiram Walker? I got a couple, but I don't want to say it till other people have a chance. No? All right. I thought it was cool that the barrels were emptied and refilled right away. They don't dry whatsoever. It's like a big assembly line. And I can't remember how many Davin was saying was filled at one point or emptied at one point.
6?
And the siphoning system was really cool too, right?
Yeah,
anyone else read about
that's
that?
the way most people do it.
Really? So it's not dumped in. I thought, so they siphon it out. Why don't they take away the char or so filter it as they're siphoning it then? Doesn't that make sense?
You'd have to ask an engineer. I don't think.
All right.
I think
so that's one.
You want to get that done in a real big hurry.
Okay. So they're just sucking it out right away. Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. And then filling the other one right away and then shipped away. So that, I don't know. I didn't picture it like that. I pictured them kind of draining them into maybe 2 or 3 barrels at once into one kind of container. And then maybe it being filtered at one point and then coming out. I've never seen the process beyond our distilleries here. So
and they're sucking it up the barrels. They're probably going through a massive filter at that point for the particulate anyways.
Well, that would have been my guess.
That would make sense for anything that I know of. Drawing liquids out of any kind of sort of thing. You always, no different in your car. You have a filter after your gas tank. So anything that goes in the gas tank that's garbage gets filtered before it hits your engine. Why would you do the same with whiskey, right?
Makes sense to me.
Well, and
that's why I asked.
Yeah. Those barrels, you don't want those barrels to dry out because then they can start springing leaks a lot easier.
Yeah. Now the wood would shrink once it's dry too. That's great.
If you keep them wet, they're not gonna spring leaks.
And they're not fighting that at all. I've got one in here that dried pretty quickly, so I have to put it together, or I keep moving the bands down closer and closer to keep it tighter and tighter. My other one is they're the only ones that do unmalted rye, but we talked about that before, so that's not a new one. But this is all the rye is chill filtered. All rye is chill filtered because of calcium. Correct me, Davin. Calcium oxalate crystals.
Oxalate
crystals, because it becomes cloudy over time, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, they've stopped using malted rye as well.
Did they?
Yes, they don't use malted rye anymore.
I wanted to get something where it was their rye. Maybe I could still get some of their malted rye somewhere, just so I could taste the difference between the two side by side. Anyways.
Get some of the old lot 40s. The old lot 40s had malted rye.
I do have that.
So how old? How far back do you think?
Oh, well, in the 90s.
Oh,
that's a long
not that far back. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. And did anyone catch that they had a single malt at one point?
Yeah, isn't that cool?
Wonder how far that goes back.
100 years or more.
Yeah.
Oh,
Epic
okay.
year. Yeah.
And I'm hoping they come back and make. Why wouldn't they do that? Do you think, Davin?
It's pretty expensive making malt whiskey.
Yeah, I don't care. I want to try it. I'll buy it. Just give me some. I want to try it.
But doesn't it come down to a volume thing? Like for the big distilleries, it's about doing lots of whiskey quickly and getting it out and reproducing it all the time. If they got to stop and make something new all the time, and that just kind of throws a wrench in everything.
It might,
Well,
but I still don't care.
What I was told when I first toured their bottling plant was that it costs about $250,000 to change the tools for a particular bottle. So they don't want to change brands very often.
Okay.
And they were bottling about 500 bottles a minute. So that's a lot of volume. But since then, I know they have put in another bottling line which goes considerably slower, so they can really do small batch whiskeys there now. But I don't know why they would do malt whiskey though, considering the size of their fermenters, and the Scots already do it so well.
Yeah.
Well, Nick and Kent, the next time you see Dr. Don online with me, we can put a little plug in there. Hey, Don, how about this here?
I'm not going to plug them making malt whiskey because I love what they're making now.
I have to agree with Davin, but the malt whiskey added to their line would be a great addition.
Yeah,
But
and
that being said,
about 200 people will buy it.
21-year-old Olorosa, so I don't know if I'm going to bug him too much more on that.
Yeah. But Crown Royal has experimented with single malt whiskey.
Really?
They have some in barrels right now. Yeah.
Interesting to try.
It's pretty awesome too.
Oh,
See, you like it, Davin, and you would like it if here in Walker did it too. I'm sure. Anyways, guys, I have a couple. We still have more questions about this section, but let's get to what's in our drams, ladies and gentlemen. Let's do that right now. I want to find out what's in there. Davin, I'm starting with you as always. Click.
I've got the Civo single malt from Quebec. That 209 on there, that's just an inventory number, which I really quite enjoy. It's got a lot of richness to it. What's really cool is that it really smells like milk chocolate. There's a real chocolate note on this. It's lush in your mouth, lots of fruit, things like that. And so I think this is a really nice malt whiskey coming out of Quebec.
Beautiful. Nick, are you ready?
Sure.
I'm just waiting for.
So I'm doing first up the Artisan Single Malt Whiskey from Shelter. So this was the one of their mainstays after they did their inaugural release. They title it Sunsets and Sea Air. It's really light. There's a lot of pit fruit notes. I think of nectarines and a bit of salt and caramel.
Mm.
On the mouth, it's short finish. And I'm kind of waiting for a little bit more to come off of it. I know this is one of the earlier releases. I love this, their double barrel, and I just absolutely love it. It just seems that it has developed more flavors and they've expanded the profile further. But overall, it's a fun whiskey to play with.
And do you want to do the other one now, or do you want to wait till the after dram and talk about that there?
I'll save it for the after draft.
Beauty. All right. Yukon Dave, you're up, buddy.
All right, I got the Gibson's 12 in my little glass here. I bought it a while ago and was going to use it, but I didn't really care for it so much 2 weeks ago. Tried it today and thought, yeah, now it has a nose. And I get that butterscotch it's taken me about 3 weeks to figure this out, but I get a lot of butterscotch with a lot of these Canadian whiskeys that I've picked up.
Dave, we talked about this a bit before, but do you think you're liking it more because our palate to Canadian whiskey is kind of developing a little bit? We've tried more and we're more used to it?
I actually 100%. I now know I'm getting a better taste for it. I'm picking up that butterscotch. I'm getting a bit of a nice mouthfeel that I like, and it's been with everything. And so when you say that, I had no Canadian whiskey other than some small distillery whiskeys here, but I'd like to keep this Weiser's 15, and I'd like to keep this Lot 40 on my bar at all times. I'm
Good man.
really
I
happy.
agree.
I mean, there's some of the ones I've got that I won't buy again, but I'm glad I tried them because I think it expanded my knowledge on what I do like and what I don't like about Canadian whiskey.
Well, isn't that how we are with all whiskey, buddy? There's some we like, some we love, some we don't like, right?
Yeah. I got a peated whiskey on my desk I've had in the glass for three days, and I just can't get past the smell. And I was talking to the whiskey neighbor about it today. He says, geez, I haven't tried that yet. I said, well, let me know what you think, because it smells like a musty cupboard somewhere.
I wonder if that Gibson's Finest, once it was opened and oxidized a little bit too, may have changed the flavor profile for you.
I think that's a good observation, yeah. And these do need a little bit.
Need a little bit. Hi, my name's Kent. I'm Whiskey Ass, and tonight I am doing a bourbon sling. I'll just hold this up a little bit so those that want to try this with me. We're using blood oranges in here, which is giving it a great flavor that goes very well with 43 copper pot. The flavors are all over in this. I can't even describe how tasty this is, and that could get dangerous later on. You mix a little bit of the cherry and the lemon and the orange, and it's mixing with the whiskey of the copper pot, and it's just like it explodes in your mouth. So this is probably my new summer drink. Although the wife says it's kind of a pain in the ass to make.
Well, it's worth the time, isn't it?
Oh, totally. You can see how nice and orange that is from the blood oranges.
I do like blood oranges. All right, Don, you're up.
So I am drinking Crown Royal XO. And this is interesting. So I had just opened up the bottle and it seems a little subdued. I'm really curious how it opens up over time. But you do get a little bit of a must on the nose, which I don't, shy away from. It's kind of a welcome change to some of the whiskeys I'm used to drinking. But when you sip it, you start to get like cedar notes, which I have never experienced cedar in a whiskey. So that's really cool. And then it does have, like Davin mentioned, that gingery leather flavor within it. And I mean, I have a hard time always picking out tobacco. And Davin mentioned tobacco in the book, in the description for this whiskey. So I think over time with some oxygen getting to it and letting it open up, add some a little bit water, I can finally experience that tobacco flavor. But it's really good pour.
Excellent. And an excellent choice. And I bought it today.
Nice.
I did. Well, we talked about it last week, but yeah.
I had to get it because it matches my my limited bottle.
And I'm sure it matches a whole bunch of others as well. Right? In there. So here I am. So Stock and Barrel. And Davin, you're the Canadian Whisky Awards, are you not?
That's right.
So I noticed that right here. Won the Canadian Whisky Awards 2015. And that's pretty well at the beginning when this first came out, is it not? When the Stock and Barrel came out with the rye? Pretty soon?
I can't remember. It's been a while now, yeah.
Is it? Okay. Well, I like it. And I love it. I don't love it. I like it. I don't like it. I kind of go back and forth. And you can see by the bottle, I've had it for maybe a year and a half, 2 years. It's 60.2%. It's bottle 118 of 192. If I read the back, handmade from grain to glass. Small batch, non-chill filter, no color added. Please enjoy responsibly, as we all should. But when I come back to this, actually, who was it? I think it was you, Kent. You did not like it, correct? Just recently you were telling me you didn't like it?
Out of the 3 flavor profiles that we bought, that was my least favorite of the 3.
Least favorite. Okay.
And it just palate nicely. And now again, I need to go back to it because it was that one day maybe my flavor taste buds were off, something I ate, who knows. But I noticed I felt quite let down after tasting the other 2.
Okay. All right. Well, I bought this on my birthday 2 years ago, and I bought it with several other ryes. And it was my 49th birthday. Bought it with several other ryes, and just to try to find my favorite rye, because I've liked rye for a while. And when I was younger, it was rye and Coke, and I stopped rye and then went back to rye probably about 4 years ago, and found that my favorite was the Millstone 100. And that my second favorite rye was the Lot 40 cast strength, even though Dr. Don doesn't know why I like cast strength, but I like it. And this is, I go back and forth. It might be in the top 5, it might not, but sometimes I absolutely love it. And my first taste tonight was fantastic. 60% just woke me right up. So I was very ready for this. But I can't get beyond the dill pickle that Don was talking, Dr. Don was talking about. Was that 3 weeks ago already, guys?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And you think now I taste it just about everywhere I go with the rye. And I don't think it's a bad thing. Don said it is, and I shouldn't be looking for it, or I shouldn't want it in there, but I think I like it. So I'm going to stick with my love of the rye. I'm going to say I like this a lot. And for the moment, at least, we're happy. How's that? Good.
Well, I love stock and barrel rye because I think it brings something new to rye. There's no other rye that tasted like that until that one came along. It's like they're taking rye grain and doing an entirely different thing with it, and I really enjoy it. I see from the comments that Nick has been kicked out by her connection. I wonder if there's any way to get her back in.
I wonder if her cat.
Let's get her back in.
Yeah. There she is.
It's Nick's cat.
She's
I agree.
Hey, Davin.
Yeah.
Have you been to Stock and Barrel's place?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Just kind of curious.
Everywhere. Everyone wants Don at their place.
I've seen them in some offerings down in the U.S. Like, how big are these guys?
I'm not sure how big they are, but yes, they're. I know I went into Benny's in Chicago once, and they must have had like 14 or 15 facings.
Yeah, I saw them in San Francisco.
And they've got a new distributor. I think it's somebody out of Texas now, who is really going great guns for them.
Okay.
And of course that's more Canadian whiskey territory down southern states too, and I guess right along the Canadian border. So they export a lot. I'm surprised that distillery hasn't been bought by a big company yet. Honestly, they're just ripe for the picking.
Maybe they don't want to sell to a big distillery.
Well, Kent, you might be right. I mean, Whiskey asked, you might be right.
Well, Kent, if someone throws you $150 million, I think you're taking it no matter how. I don't know. Pretty hard to get the money that's being thrown around right now.
That are making a product that absolutely love what they're doing might not be in it for the money, right? They might just be for the love of what they're doing, and they might just say, go pound sand.
But I think there's a lot of guys in our industry that are in it hoping that somebody's going to buy them. Yeah. I've heard that from a lot of guys say, we're just waiting for somebody to come by with a check.
Yeah.
Everybody needs an exit strategy.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you got to be ready for your exit strategy too. I mean, I know in the past I have given up companies, bad partners and stuff, and they've gone to sell it to other people. I'm happy that the company I started is still running. I'm sad that I'm not part of it anymore.
Oh, okay.
I had somebody asked me what my exit strategy was once, and I said lightning. And they were shocked when I said that.
One of those. All right. We, ladies and gentlemen, are going to do a little bit of a retrospective of our last 7 weeks. So, Davin, I'm going to start with you first. Have you ever been part of a book club? 1. 2, what was it like for you? And I'm wondering if you got as much out of it as we did, really.
Well, No, I've never been part of a formal book club in the past, so it wasn't like anything to me, and I didn't get anything out of it. No, I know you're right. I have really enjoyed this, and I found things in my book that I wish I had said differently because they have led to some misunderstandings. And tonight we're finishing off, and Nick has sent me back to do some more research on rye because it's funny. I just had a great big article in Whisky Advocate magazine about rye and about all the different aspects of rye, and I studied this for years, full time, and yet here I am. I really wish I knew why I hadn't asked more questions when they said they were using spring rye, because to me it doesn't make sense unless they're using a rapidly maturing variety just so they can get a lot of starch out of it.
Well, I believe you're going to find or get to the bottom of things.
Yeah, I will. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure.
Possibly using a spring rye to get a lot of product out of it as maybe a base, and then building it up with maybe a winter variety or so, doing more of a blend out of it, or
you don't use rye as a base.
Okay.
You use corn. You can get 16% alcohol out of corn, especially at Hard and Walker where they feed the yeast.
Yeah.
That's like national brand beer. That's why they use so much corn syrup. They get way more alcohol.
Yeah. All right. This one's for the panel. Is this what you expected when you were asked to join a whiskey book club? And it's open to anyone.
Well, I'll start. I expected to drink, and I did have a little too much a couple nights. But other than that, I had nothing to think. Like I had no idea on what was going to happen.
Okay.
I had no idea that Davin was going to be as smart as he is.
My parents didn't either.
Good one. Has anyone else been in a book club before?
Yeah.
No.
Never? Okay.
No.
So
not even in
I
school.
haven't either. This is my first. My wife's been in several of them, but this is nothing like my wife's book clubs. This is a lot more interesting, I think. Right?
Real whiskey, so.
And we read the book, whereas on her book clubs, when you're listening to them, I don't know if they've read the book all that often. My wife has, apparently. But yes, she has. But
Some people still need their social.
Hand comes from the side of the screen with a little whack upside the head there.
Well, has this COVID thing kind of forced us into this? I think this is a great way to meet. I mean, we're not going anywhere
no.
in the evening. So this is, I had somebody ask me today, said, geez, that's a lot of commitment to do all these Saturdays. I said, where am I going?
Yeah.
Well, I did think
backyard to sit around the fire.
Before. So this isn't a new thing with the Whiskey Book Club in my mind. But you're right, Dave. This gave me the impetus to actually get off my gluteus maximus and actually start doing it. Because I always wanted people to read them at the same time as me, so someone to talk to, right?
Right.
So because I like to geek out about stuff, it's nice to bounce ideas off of people as well. And this was perfect. And to get Davin was a coup.
Amazing.
Very well.
I am so privileged to have met you guys and worked with you guys. Honestly, you guys are all awesome. And Nick, I think you're brilliant. I found you on Instagram.
Yeah.
And I just loved your cereal tasting. Really. And I said, I've got to meet that woman somewhere. And next thing I know, I'm in a book club with her. Anybody who's watching this, if you're not following Black Cat Whiskey on Instagram, you've got to start. Honestly, she doesn't repeat what everybody else tells her. She thinks for herself, and I know.
Yay.
I'm totally.
Well,
I
thank you
can
so much,
hardly wait to
Davin.
get to Edmonton so we can sit down someplace with about 10 beers and talk about whiskey.
And cereal. And cereal.
And cereal.
It's pretty doable, I think.
Well,
Alrighty.
come up to Edmonton and help Nick rebuild her shelves after they collapsed, or almost.
I don't think she'd appreciate that.
Alrighty, so
Both had the same
another
problem around the same time.
I'm going to go by section. So section 1, then section 2, section 3. come up with a word, couple words, a sentence, a quote that reminded you of each one of the sections that we did. So for me, I'll start it off. Section 1, Hordeum vulgare. Does anyone remember that one? It's not the only grain to pay attention to. Rye, corn, and wheat are out there as well. So anyone else? A word for section 1.
Oh, what was the one for barley?
Yeah.
That was barley.
That was the one.
That was Hordeum vulgare. You had another one.
Oh, God. There was another one. There were so many.
Well, that's not a word. It could just be a thought or a feeling. Something from that chapter that sticks out.
I think.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I think from section 1, the picture of the red line.
Oh, yeah, that was a great one.
Yeah.
Seeing the amount of absorption in the staves, and like, that's part of like my band is a whiskey barrel.
Right.
So you can still see some of the color change, but when you see them on just a mass of staves, and then even on the head, how much absorption goes in, I don't know. I always found that really interesting.
Most of that red line is whiskey going between the staves. It soaks in, but it really goes between the staves as well. So you find the red line's not nearly as deep if you go further into the stave.
Oh, cool.
As it is not right on the outside.
Good to know.
Really, for me, section 1 was really Canadian whiskey. What? and as Dr. Don said, yeah, you are a typical Canadian. We don't look at our own country for good whiskey.
That's going to change, my friend.
It has changed in the last few weeks. I went from 1 or 2 bottles on my shelf that I never even look at. They were for guests that like to mix them with their Coke, and over 30 bottles on my shelf of stuff that I'm drinking. And I have a fairly extensive Scotch collection that I don't drink anymore.
Well, we should fix that. We're not discriminatory at all here in this group. We will drink every country's Scotch.
This is true. All I got
Section 2. Well, unless someone else had a section 1. All right. Section 2. For me, distilling is a science and blending is an alchemical art. That
Section
was mine.
2 for me. Section 2 for me were the posters. I absolutely love the posters in section 2.
Yeah. Well, yeah, when you start section 2 with
they're so informative. I mean, granted, I had to we'll just go translate all of the numerics or all the metrics, but it's still very informative. Yeah, very informative.
I thought so, and we did talk to Davin about actually getting these things on posters too. I think Davin can make some money online with those, right?
Oh, probably.
Yeah, well, I think that I'd have to talk to the publisher about that because, I own the copyright, but I've assigned it to them.
Oh, okay. Or we could just do it and not tell them. No one will ever know. We're good.
Local printers. You get the PDFs on your computer, you can just email us.
Oh, no. Alrighty. Section 3. Davin supports me in double fisting my whiskeys to differentiate the flavors and aromas. So thank you very much, Davin. Yeah. That's what came out for me. And I was allowed to be a pig and leave my glasses till the next morning so I could smell them then.
Yeah. And again,
now I kind of get Canadian whiskey more because I can pick out those smells coming out of them. I do the same thing. I do straight out of the bottle. I'll do one that's cut basically a little below, right around 30%, and then I do one that I put the whiskey in the glass, swish it around, and then drink that and smell that one the next day because it has there's my Gibson's for today. That one's got the lid on it, but there's no liquid in there now. It's just got a hint. So I love that after smell. Like give it a day or so.
It's really telling, isn't it?
Well, I think it's a better way for me to judge the whiskey. as I get to look at things, because I can drink the glass. I can drink the glass, and then it doesn't really mean a lot. But now that I have to look at it seriously, now it means a lot more.
It's interesting how next day that even if you leave a little bit of liquid in glass, have one empty, the differences between the glasses are.
Yeah.
Get lots of oxidation.
Yeah.
So
And I would
the
never ever
tasting
thought to look at it that way, right? You know, you sit down at a typical tasting and you got a flight of 4 to 6 whiskeys in front of you, and you're like, okay, what's different between the whiskeys? You never think of it the next day. What happens to the whiskey once it's open to air for a while?
Yeah.
Well, the alcohol leaves.
Yeah. Yeah.
John,
And once the alcohol is gone, what does that leave with? Just the flavor profile.
That leaves the other stuff that's been dissolved in that liquid. So, like anything, the alcohol in the water evaporates. It's got to leave other stuff behind. And I know that from my chemical background is we always worry about stuff falling out onto surfaces if you don't clean them right.
Mm-hmm.
All right, section 4 is a concise history of Canadian whiskey. And I know at least one other person knows this quote. Thomas, the only Molson with a passion for distilling whiskey, was effectively, and as it turns out, unnecessarily disinherited. Thomas outlived his cousin wife. That was my favorite part of that chapter.
Cousin wife, yeah.
His cousin wife.
We spent a fair amount of time on that little technicality.
Yep. And prohibition. But anyways, something that showed or came out for you lovely people in that chapter. Nope, that section.
I'm gonna back to section 3 real quick. For me, it was the two key components in flavor for Canadian whiskey were the pepper and the mouthfeel.
Oh, yeah.
I thought that was an interesting way to kind of create their own.
Yeah.
I go back to chapter 5, and I've always been in love with the barrels, and now I'm finding out that yeast is doing most of the work and the flavor.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said before, barrels are sexy, and the yeast nobody talks about.
Yeah, I think yeast was a big learning curve for all of us.
Yeah,
it was quite surprising how it actually produced the whiskey more so that a lot. You know, we all think you produce a neutral spirit and throw it in a barrel and then you get flavor out of it. Not so much. It's more of the yeast that.
Well, if you listen to the Scottish, they say it's all the barrel, little to do with malt, and they seem to be leaving out this whole yeast component.
Well, yeah. But that might be their hidden secret, right? No, we won't tell them about the yeast. We'll make them think it's the barrels, and then the price of the barrels go up. And
Well, keep getting this cheap yeast.
That's right. They're buying cheap yeast.
Yeah.
Yeah. Section 4 for me was, I guess, realizing more that the people that you would have expected to come over here to make whiskey went straight to rum.
Yeah.
And the ones that you expected to start making beer started making whiskey.
They were making rum in Scotland at the time too, by the way.
Oh, were they?
And they
Okay.
were drinking rum in Scotland. Rum was way more popular than whiskey.
Never heard that.
That makes perfect sense.
Oh yeah, Scotland was a rum country.
Well, and what was more surprising that Canadian is not so much the whiskey didn't come out of the Scottish or the Irish. It came out of Germany and everybody else.
And England.
Yeah.
Yeah, the ones you expect to make beer made whiskey.
Yeah, there we go.
Maybe that's why they left.
And section 5,
Sam
the big
Brown.
8. The massiveness, for me, it's the massiveness of Crown Royal and that Alberta rye reigns supreme in the world. We're fantastic.
Well, and not to mention that Crown Royal took 25 years before they started shipping to the U.S.
That was cool.
A long time to wait around before shipping to an exporter of such a massive gift.
Quality has always been number one with them. And they do not use any scientific instruments in their blending lab. They're forbidden. Everything is done by the human nose. Everything is done with the human nose. And they are far and away the most the most developed blenders in the world. Many other brands that you know about, Glenlivet, for example, they blend the Crown Royal way. Many rum brands blend the Crown Royal way. Crown Royal really set the bar for blending, and all over the world, the best spirits, the best brown spirits are blended the Crown Royal way. They really did it, and you go there, like obviously they have scientific instruments at the distilleries to measure what's coming off the stills, but you get into the blending lab and it's all done by nose. And and it takes a couple of years. It takes a year of being tested to make sure you can really detect every little nuance in the whiskey. And then it takes about 8 years of training to become a blender at Crown Royal. It's a real art. And it was Sam Bronfman who said, he told him to develop this process, and it was him who said, distilling is a science, blending is an art. And when you taste his products, man, they're just so seamless. And year after year after year after year, they can really make the same thing. It's really quite remarkable.
And
Davin,
this was my introduction to Crown Royal.
Uh-huh.
Mix that with a Coke on your way to the drive-in theater.
Davin, I'm going to ask your opinion about the Northern Harvest Rye. I know when Jim Murray came out and it was the whiskey of the year, everyone wanted it and you couldn't get it in Canada. It was really hard. Did you have the same opinion? Did you like it as much?
I liked it a lot, and I still do like it a lot.
Yeah.
I was surprised because I just didn't think that he would pay attention to that, but obviously you're going to get a lot of attention if you say a Canadian whiskey is the best whiskey in the world. What I found was really cool was I poured it very often in master classes, and if I poured it and people didn't know what they were tasting, and I asked them, so what do you think? Give it a score, and they said, 9.2, 9.3, somewhere around there. And then I'd pour and tell them what it was, and they say, 8.3, 8.4. If they knew it was Crown Royal, they would always rate it a full point, or on a 100-point scale, 10 points lower. I think that it really, the way some people like a certain wine because of the label, it's, the label effect.
Yeah.
I think it worked against Crown Royal Northern Harvest Rye. That's a beautifully made whiskey. And, I know that some people have said there have been batch differences. There have been no batch differences. There have been tasters differences, because the way they make that stuff, it's impossible for there ever to be a batch that isn't exactly the same as the original. So it's really, I quite like it. I still like it a lot, and it's so inexpensive.
Yeah.
You poured that for us after the Canadian Club Chronicles 41.
Oh, did I?
At Banff. I believe Northern Harvest was right after that. And when you told us what it was, I was kind of shocked.
Disappointed, right?
Oh, I wasn't disappointed. I was shocked in the progression of the lineup. You went to a 41 and then Northern Harvest, and then you ended with one of the, I think, Monarch of Crown.
Oh, Monarch. Awesome.
But it was surprisingly like tasty. And like in the States or in Washington, it's a $31 bottle.
Yeah.
And I think it might be better than this, but
it is better than that.
Than the VO? Well, I just bought the VO for $70. All right, guys.
It's really good whiskey, yeah.
Yeah.
We're on our last question of the night before we start on to the after dram. So, without stating the obvious that we learned a lot about Canadian whiskey, what did you learn that will stay with you for a long time? Something we learned over the last 7 weeks.
You know what? There's a phrase that stuck out for me. I've got to read it here. It's towards Canadian whiskey has, in effect, become a cash cow for multinationals to exploit rather than develop through investment and innovation. I think that really to the problem that we have with Canadian whiskey is it's been sort of pushed aside. a quick fix for businesses. And in our minds, that has really changed how we look at it. And after reading the book and sitting and drinking and listening to Davin answer our questions, you sort of go, whoa, I got to think about Canadian whiskey differently.
I agree completely. Good comment.
So for me, you know, in the States, we kind of perceive Canadian whiskey to be cheap whiskey. You know, it's all of our first whiskeys. We usually start Crown and Coke, and that's our introduction. That was my introduction, was Crown and Coke, and I loved every minute of it. But when you read this book, it's all of the details you kind of wish you knew. Like, yeah, you can look it up online, but it's kind of just like, oh, maybe it's marketing, and on you go. When you have this much information, this much detail in front of you, it's like, oh, I really need to change my perception of this spirit. You know, it is on the same level of Scotch. It is on the same level of the better American spirits that we produce. But the innovation that's in Canadian whiskey is mind blowing, in how, you know, a lot of influence comes from Canadian whiskey, whether it's admitted or not. And then having Davin in the book club, it's like a night and day difference. It's like, okay, every between the line you have here, Davin's explained it, you know, more than you could ever imagine, and you just want to listen to talk. Davin, you're fantastic to listen to. So, like I loved being in this book club, because, you know, you can read the book and then it's like, okay, but the author's right here, and the wealth of knowledge that went into 250 pages, 270 pages is right next to you, and he'll elaborate on everything. Like, oh well, I had to reduce it for a word count, but here's the real information. Yeah, I'm not going to forget this.
Yeah,
That's a great point.
How kind, Don.
I mean, honestly,
Well,
you know,
you deserve it.
several hundred pages, and having Davin on is probably worth several thousand pages.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's so mind blowing. The information that where we started 6 weeks ago and where we are today are night and day. I mean, I would have never ever given a second look at Canadian whiskeys hadn't it been for this book club and for you, Davin.
Well, thank you.
So for me, I read the book, and then Dolph sends out questions, and I think, Jesus, I didn't read that. Where did that come up? And I had to go back and reread it. So I'm thinking that I read stuff, but do I really comprehend stuff?
Mm-hmm.
And then having Davin come on and really explain things, I think, oh my God, my respect for Canadian whiskey has changed a ton. And so when I'm talking to groups about what I sell, and somebody says something about Canadian whiskey, I'll be defending Canadian whiskey.
Yeah.
And I know there's lower priced whiskey that should be mixed with Coke, but there's also really good whiskey.
Oh yeah.
So you've got an advocate for Canadian whiskey in me. Thanks, Davin.
Yeah.
Excellent. Nick, I'm going to put you on the spot. Actually, I think Nick, I already did. She's frozen.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Sorry, Nick. I won't put you on the spot. I'll put me on the spot. I'll put me on the spot. So, for me, really, it's been the development of my taste buds. And when we first started, I was tasting Canadian whiskey as it should be a malt, so a Scotch. And that's what I was comparing just about everything to. And that it still makes sense to me in a certain respect, because I love Scotch, and the things I go back to is Scotch. But now, to appreciate the whiskeys that I've been buying, and I've been buying way too much, I've been told, but, it's because I can now relate it to what it should be. And I've never been a blend guy. I've liked the single barrel, single malt, cask strength, as unadulterated as possible. But And Nick was one of these proponents, and she called me on this at a couple tastings that I was doing. Why don't you go into blends? Why don't you try the blends? Why don't you try to experience something a bit different? And what this gave me was the experience and the reason to do it and someone to bounce information off of. So I'm a teacher. I love to teach. I love to try to give people information and bring them to a point where they can learn stuff. And it makes me really happy when I get to do the exact same thing. So we're going to thank Davin again for that. Thank you very much, kind sir. My appreciation is undoubtedly, let's say 75% because of you. I'm a math teacher. I was 2%. So let's say you're the guy. So we're going to, we lost Nick, and I'm sorry because we want to get her in here, but we're going to sign off. And because we're at the 1 hour limit, we're going to come back to the after dram, and hopefully we'll hear that same answer from Nick. So again, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a fantastic start to our evening. Thanks to our listeners. Thanks to the panel. You guys are great. And thanks to Davin for joining us again tonight. We'll be back next week on Saturday, May 16th, 7 o'clock. But this will be our first discussion about Ralphie's book, our very first one about Ralphie. Now, we tried to get him on with us, but we couldn't. And if we did, him being 8 hours ahead of us might make the 7 o'clock start kind of a bit different. But regardless, we'll be discussing 3 chapters a week for the next 4 weeks while indulging ourselves in different Ralphie whiskeys of the year each time. So our very first week, and I'm going to put it up. Don, can you hold up your bottle of the very first one we're going to do? There we go. So we got the Bunnahabhain 12, and that was his 2010 whiskey of the year. Now, I know we're all looking forward to it. Davin won't be back unless he wants to be back, because he's invited anytime he wants to come back. But please join us in 5 minutes on this channel for the After Dram. It's, again, our Walking Dead style debrief. We relax. We talk about, we still ask the questions, but I asked the other questions that too geeky or I didn't think fit in with the other questions during that time. It's time for us to relax and enjoy ourselves. So, my friends, thank you very much, and hopefully I'll see you again in 5 minutes. Have a good night.
Cheers.
Cheers. Oh, nope. Cheers, everybody.